Hello, I'm Faye.
And I'm Becky. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about maximising your potential as a leader and living your best life personally and professionally.
So join us on the M53 for our weekly chats, full of insights and inspiration, and of course, a cuppa and a butty.
Faye, it's called a brew. Thank you for joining us. In this episode, we are going to be looking at our mindset, what it is and why it's so important to tackle it.
And what is mindset, Becky? Because let's face it, we all have a mind. So I guess mindset is about how we get it to work for us.
I have never actually thought of it in that term, Faye. Isn't that silly? You know, I'm a coach. I talk about mindset all the time, but looking at, okay, yeah, I've got a mind. How am I going to set it to work for me? And that is exactly what it is. And, you know, mindset is a real coaching term. You will not come across a coach who doesn't talk to you about mindset. But do they actually define it? When we as coaches are talking to clients about mindset, do they understand it? And Faye, before we started recording this, you told me about a post that you'd seen on Facebook, which I think just for me really epitomizes this air of mystery that seems to be around mindset. Do you want to just share what that post was saying?
I will do, yes, because I read it and I know where the person who wrote it's coming from, but actually it's all this thing about words. We use these words and do we actually understand what they mean? Because the post was talking about the fact that you don't need to do work on your mindset to develop yourself. You don't actually, that coaches will get you to do all this mindset work, but actually you don't need to do that. You just need to work on your self-perception, which I agree with. But
because that's mindset.
Yeah. Self-perception is mindset, and it's your self-belief. It's your belief in who you are, what you can do, and where you can go with that. And actually, for me, that's mindset. And then we can break it down. We can break it down into all those different subsections, but self-belief, self-perception, for me, that's the overarching strategy of mindset. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So what they were saying you don't need to work on, and then went on to describe, is exactly what mindset is. And the way that we view ourselves, the way that we view the things that we can and can't do. You'll hear coaches talking about your beliefs and your limiting beliefs. This is all in mindset work too. Those beliefs that you've got about yourself that are holding you back, they are quite literally limiting you. And you might not even realize it. And when I start any course of training with clients, mindset is the first thing that we look at. And I like to share the example that we have a situation, okay, or we have a goal. Let's say it's a goal. It's something that we want to make happen. So we immediately think about, okay, well, what action do I need to take in order to achieve this goal? But the action is the final part of a longer list of things. So first we have the goal, and then we have a thought about the goal. And that thought can be in our subconscious. We may not even be aware that we are thinking this thought, okay? And that thought triggers an emotion, and it's from there that we act after the emotion. So if we have a thought that is telling us that we can't achieve our goal, then that is the place that we start to act from. It's going to take you a lot longer to get to your goal if you are working from the basis of having the thought and that mindset that I can't achieve it.
Yeah, it is. And that's why it's so important to start with that mindset work, isn't it? We have to start looking at what are those emotions telling us about our thoughts, and where are we going with that, and where do we naturally go with it? Because our brains will actually take us to that negative side. We've all got negative Nelly sitting on our shoulder. I don't know what yours is. Isn't yours called Judy?
Judgmental Judy.
Judgmental Judy. Well, mine's negative Nelly. She sits on my shoulder and she says to me, I get these thoughts, I get these light bulb moments, and I get a lot of them. I'm quite a creative person, but I get them, and then I think about them a little bit, and then the emotion comes in. I think, I'm quite excited to do that, and then there's that but the big but. Can I? Ooh, where do I go with this? Can I actually do it? What do I need to do to, take action on this? Do I want to do it? How does that feel? How long is it going to take? And when we ask ourselves these types of questions, we can just quite literally talk ourselves out from doing it. I've just shared with Becky that I had an initial thought of doing a podcast back in 2017. I remember going on holiday and I was reading Carrie Green's She Means Business book and sitting by the side of the pool and thinking to myself, I'm going to do a podcast. And I'm going to tell you something. My husband has a business where he produces podcasts for his clients. So he was all for me. Yeah, do a podcast. We've got all the gear. We've got all the gear. I was just going to say, no idea. Because he'd got all the gear and I had no idea on how to pull it all together, but I had his support there. So I was thinking about the podcast and I literally talked myself out of it. We're in 2021 now and we're in the last quarter nearly. And by the time this podcast goes to air, we will be in the last quarter, 2021. We're talking 3.5 years later. Mm. And I'm doing this now because actually I'm doing it with Becky. I love that collaboration, but I talked myself out of it for 2 years. I told myself I couldn't do it. Nobody will want to listen to me. What does that tell you about how I believed I could be on a podcast?
Mm. Well, you tell us, Faye. What does that tell us?
Yeah. Well, it tells me a lot. I mean, I've recorded podcasts with other people, but it was about having my own podcast. So it wasn't that fear of talking. I think the fear came about, do I have enough to say? I mean, I can talk a lot. I can say a lot about nothing. Yeah. But do I have enough to say that is of importance to the people who want to listen to the podcast? Mm. But then I remember a client saying to me once, she was working with me on a 6-month program and she said to me, gosh, you've got so much information, so much knowledge, Faye, you could write a book. And I was just like, I couldn't write a book, don't be daft. But actually, when you think about all the knowledge that you do retain from over the years, and it naturally comes out when we're talking. I'm the kind of person I talk to think, so lots of things come out while I'm thinking about things. But in terms of my self-belief of actually doing something tangible with that knowledge, I didn't believe that I had it. Although I knew I had it, but I didn't know if it would be of importance to somebody else.
Yeah, and because I think it's really easy to get stuck in that space of, well, if I know it, everyone must know it. Yes. Therefore, why would they listen to me talking about it?
Yes.
And it's not until you start having those conversations and you realise, oh, everyone doesn't know what I know. And all right, okay, maybe this can be useful then. But again, in for me comes judgmental Judy, just like your negative Nelly, who says, well, it's only a few people that you've spoken to. That don't know those things. It's not certainly not enough to go out and start a business or start a podcast, etc., etc. And we're funny old creatures, and our brains don't always help us. Conscious thought is a really energy intense process for our brain, and so our brain likes to create shortcuts and it likes to create habits, and that includes with our thoughts as well. And so it naturally starts to look for and filter out experiences that don't fit with our current frame of reference and don't fit with those things that we've always been telling ourselves. Yeah. So we lose the evidence for the things that are the opposite of that. And so what that means then when it comes to your mindset is that when you start to try and find, okay, well, who is it that I've talked to, for example, that didn't know these great things that I know about leadership? And you can really struggle to think because your brain's discarded that information. It doesn't always help us in that way. It thinks it's been super helpful because it's been super efficient. It's freeing up space for, really important new tasks that it doesn't yet know how to solve. But actually, it's tripping us up, and it is just adding layer upon layer to those limiting beliefs, those beliefs that hold us back. And that's what we need to start uncovering if we want to develop our mindset.
Yeah. Our reticular activating system is working. That's the fella working in overdrive, showing us more evidence of what we're looking for. So if we're thinking like I was, have I got enough knowledge to actually host my own podcast? My reticular activating system's going, you're thinking, have you got, which is a negative. I'm going to show you that you haven't, because that's the thought.
That's what we're looking for.
I wasn't saying, right, what can I talk about today? When Becky and I sat down to plan this podcast, we got all these ideas of things to talk about. Great ideas. We have got that knowledge. We can talk about it. And this is where we have to flip that switch. This is where the mindset work comes in. And I do want to talk about this because social media is such a massive part of our lives. My reticular activating system was showing me a lot of posts about people at one point in my life where people were doing the mindset work, and they were talking about that I do the work. And my question was, what are you doing?
What is this work?
What's this work? And to be fair, all the work is about realizing where you're thinking negatively and flipping that switch. And there are various things that you can do to flip the switch. How can I flip the negative thought? How can I think in a different way? It might not be a positive situation. We're not talking about being positive Pammies here. We are talking... Everyone's got a name, Becky.
Positive Pammy.
I have no idea.
We're keeping her positive Pammy. She will sit alongside negative. No, I need another one then, don't I, to go with judgmental Judy? But go on. All right, positive Pammy.
We're not talking about that person who can only see the positive side, And we realise that life doesn't always give us the roses. It doesn't, but it is about looking at situations and thinking, how can I make the best of this? If life chucks, shit at you, let's say, if life chucks the shit at you, how do you respond? And we all have our choice of how we respond, and we can go there, and we will go there. We will go to that negative side, but actually, how does that serve us going forward? We have to pull ourselves up, and we have to do things that make us feel better. The more we feel better, the better we will feel, and it snowballs. It really does. And if we can do that, the work is looking at, why do I feel this way? And what great things have happened to me today. You hear about people doing gratitude, and if your gratitude might be that we had some rain, but actually the ground needed it. We didn't need it. We didn't need to get our hair wet on the school run and come back looking like a drowned rat. But actually, the rivers might need it. We might have gone through a dry spell. So we're grateful for the rain. We're grateful for the sunshine. What are we grateful for? It can be the little things. Might be grateful that we can put the heating on this winter because, let's not talk about energy prices.
I wasn't. I was thinking about that. I can get my log burner going, which is very exciting for me this winter. But do you know, Faye, you hit the nail on the head when you were talking there for me about it's a choice. And it is a choice. And there are so many things in our lives that happen to us that are out of our control. There are. Now, that being said, I think that often we don't realise just how much is in our control. It feels like everything's out of control. It's not. There are situations in our life that we can control, but absolutely there are things that happen to us and that are way, way out of our control. But what we do always have control and choice over is the way that we react, and the way that we respond to it again will depend on the mindset that we have. We can choose to get lost in it, we can choose to stay stuck, or we can take the hit, we can learn from it, and we can find the positive and move on. And, when it comes then to leadership and the importance of developing your mindset, leadership, we often talk about that people are often thrown into that position. So you progress through your career, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a place where you are in charge of people. There are people who are in your charge. They're in your care, and people often feel thrown at the deep end because they don't then actually realise all the things that around leadership that they actually need to be doing. And depending on the kind of mindset that they go into it with will depend on whether or not they choose to grow and develop those leadership skills, or whether they choose to flounder and say, well, no, I can't do it. I don't. Something that I hear about a lot is I don't have empathy. I just don't have it. Well, empathy is a skill. And like any other skill, it can be developed. But only if you decide to develop it. Same with confidence. I know this is something that Faye and I talk about a lot. I think if we had £1 for every time the subject of confidence came up in a coaching call, we'd be really rich people by now, because people who don't have the confidence to do whatever leadership task it is, whether that's delegate to people, whether that's speak in front of your team, all kinds of things are linked back to confidence. But that's all your mindset.
So what can we do to develop our mindset? What can we do to change things? I think the first place that I want to go with this is about being aware.
Yes.
Being aware, because we can't change anything if we're not aware. And so when we look at who we are, what we're doing, what we're not doing, what we need to do, perhaps taking a little bit of time to reflect, which is something we don't give ourselves time to do, something that I'm a massive advocate of as a coach, asking my clients to think about, giving themselves time for them. Start reflecting, start having a look at what's gone well, what hasn't gone quite so well, and what you need to change. But how you think about that, what emotions are coming up. If you remember, Becky said we have the thought, we have the emotion, and then we can act. So if it's something that we're needing to do, what emotions are coming up? Really paying attention to how we're feeling. It's when we know how we're feeling that we can start to put changes in place, put actions in place to help us change our emotion about something.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-awareness for me is the key to, well, so many things in life, but certainly when it comes to mindset, develop that self-awareness. And also have a think about what kind of overriding mindset do you have? And when I say overriding, I'm thinking in terms of a fixed or a growth mindset. Okay. So for anyone who wants to know a bit more about this, there's a great book called Mindset, funnily enough, by Dr. Carol Dweck. In this book, she talks about two different kinds of mindset, the growth and the fixed. If you have a fixed mindset, then you think that things are the way they are. They're never going to change. Your abilities, they're innate. You can't, yes, okay, maybe you could get a bit more clever, or you could learn a few more things, but they're never going to have a whole-scale impact on your life. Whereas the growth mindset instead says, well, who knows what I'm capable of? Like, really, who knows? If I put in the right amount of effort, if I use strategy, if I get help from others, well, who knows what I could be capable of? And so if we can start to adopt more of that growth mindset of believing that our limits are unknown because we've not tested them.
Yeah. Yeah.
How different would it be? How different would it be if we just treated it as a big experiment? Let's just see. Let's see how great this can be.
Do you know, you've just reminded me, I was talking to my mum, who is retired now. She and my dad are retired, and she's going through some stuff. And I was talking to her about this stuff last week. And she said, do you know, Faye, she was worried, she was anxious. And she said, do you know, Faye, I do worry about stuff now. She said, I worry about stuff a lot more now that I'm retired than when I wasn't. She said, when I was working, she said, I played the game. She said, I saw life as a game. And she said, I don't tend to these days. And I worry and I ponder and I overthink. And I thought, wow, yeah, the game of life. How can we play this game? And when you think about it, that's what this is, isn't it? How can we play this game? There's risk. There's, if you want to take it, there's risk. Pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone is, a bit risky, but how do we want to actually play this risk game of life? And it's our mindset will let us play as much as we want to play or not, as the case may be. And bringing it back to that self-belief, self-perception, it's all about us. It's all about how we think about us. How much do we want to play this game? How much do we think we can? What are our odds in this game? Love that. So I would urge you, ask yourself, what do you believe about yourself, and what do you believe about your odds of playing the game of life? And are you willing to grow through it? Or do you think your odds are a little bit fixed and you're willing to just take it as it is? One thing that a client always used to say, when I worked with her and we were talking about things that she could do to help herself and her business grow, and she'd always say, "Yeah, I'll give it a go. What's the worst that can happen?" And I'd say to her, how do you feel about that? And she'd just say, "Well, all right, really. I mean, what's the worst that could happen?" And if you ask yourself that question, what's the worst that could happen? It helps you, because you think, well, if nobody's going to die, or nobody's going to get hurt as such, or nobody's going to lose anything significant, what is the worst that can happen? Assess things from that side rather than saying, "Oh, I don't know if I can."
Yeah. Are you a person who only sees the risk, or do you see the opportunities? That are associated with the risk.
Yeah. What I do want to say is sort of a final thought on this, really, though, is that we all need reminding of this, because our brains will naturally go to that darker place. Our brains are programmed to keep us safe. So they don't really, there is a part of our brain that likes risk, but the most used part of our brain, so the one that always comes into play, is that part of our brain that wants to keep us safe. Yeah. So if something is pushing you out of your comfort zone, that's why we feel that emotion. That's why we feel, can I? Oh, me, little old me, who am I to do this? Who am I to have a podcast, but God, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Meet Me on the M53. If you'd like to know more, you can see Becky at questforest.co.uk and Faye at fayblakey.com.
Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and thank you to Wahhoo Media for our production. We'll see you next time on the M53.
Safe travels.